For more, we're going to be joined by Congressman Scott Franklin of Florida. He flew jets during his 26 years in the Navy. He's a member of the House Appropriations Committee, and we're certainly honored to have him with us on Saturday Agenda. So the collision over the Potomac and now the tragedy last night in Philly, what's your initial reaction when you saw the headlines of all these?
Well, we've come to have such a safe flying record here in the U.S. that accidents like this are extremely rare. But anytime there are mechanical and human factors involved, there is a chance of risk. And but it's just been such a long time, almost 16 years since we've had a commercial aviation accident with fatalities. So it caught everyone off guard, particularly an airport that so many of us are familiar with. I fly in and out of there every week, so it's just a devastating loss.
So what do you think caused, we'll start with the D.C. one. What do you think caused this?
Well, we've got all the factors, all the people on board now to investigate and get to the bottom of it. I hate to jump ahead of the facts because we want to make sure we get this right. But, from the early information that we've seen, there are most likely human factors involved. It appears that this collision occurred about 400 feet over the river, in which we know that the helicopter shouldn't have been there. My understanding of that helicopter route down the river is they're not supposed to be flying over 200 feet. So clearly something happened there with the reports of the manning in the control tower. That could play a factor as well. But, ultimately you had a commercial aircraft that's in a very vulnerable position on short final coming into land, transitioning to the visual landing environment. They're under positive control of air traffic controllers and really aren't in a place where they're expecting to have to make traffic calls in the see and avoid. Whereas conversely, on the other hand, the helicopter is operating under visual flight rules, and just the very basis of VFR is see and avoid. So it is ultimately the aircraft's responsibility, in the helicopter's case, to be fully aware of all the aircraft around them and to see and avoid appropriately. The air traffic controller is there to facilitate that, but ultimately it's the aircraft commander's responsibility.
The black box from American Airlines, that's been captured, thankfully. So what do you think that will reveal?
Well, it'll confirm airspeed, altitude, the course they were on, if there are any last moment diversions, any changes in pitch or angle of bank to try to avoid, if there was any communication within the crew, if they saw it. But quite honestly, where they were on short final, there's very, very limited ability to maneuver. The airplane is very vulnerable at that state in a slow, dirty configuration with the gear and flaps down. So and also in the fact that they're trying in a nighttime environment, very bright with city lights to transition to the landing area. My take is that their probably eyes were completely focused on the runway and didn't see that.
And they did have visual, though. It wasn't like it was an IFR situation where low-lying clouds. I mean, they were able to see, even though you mentioned it was nighttime and the lights do play a factor probably. But aren't there automatic alarms in the cockpit that go off when an aircraft gets too close to another one?
Well, yeah, they have the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, that the American Airlines jet would have, but also you get warnings like that sometimes in a very congested environment. They're at a point now where they're only seconds away from landing, so whether they could detect that and performing evasive maneuvers, I wouldn't really put it on them. It's really more on the helicopter to avoid.
And it's also very difficult to quickly change the trajectory of a jet. But what do you make of the FAA's preliminary report that there may not have been enough workers on that shift in the control tower? What do you make of that?
Well, again, that's all going to come out from what I've heard so far. It's not unusual. It's not prohibited. It still doesn't mean that it was good head work. And DC airspace is some of the most congested in the nation. The flight rules going in there are as tough as any in the world. So if anything, DCA ought to be manned at a higher level than most airports would be. But again, it places those controllers in a tough position though when they're dealing with VFR and IFR aircraft at the same time. When an aircraft is on IFR, on an instrument flight plan, that air traffic controller has direct control over that airplane to tell them the airspeed, the heading, altitude, all those factors. When in the course of the helicopter, VFR, that pilot has a lot of latitude, and the controller's there really just as a backup to kind of help alert him to traffic that's out there. So it's very difficult for an air traffic controller to manage all of that. Certainly to manage both at the same time. And I'm encouraged, at least already, to see the FAA put some heavy restrictions on allowing of those helicopters flying VFR. Because in my view, there should never be any reason for a routine training flight with a helicopter flying VFR to be anywhere near the approach corridor for a commercial airliner.
So you mentioned, I mean, Reagan National is the busiest runway in the country, and you know, airports like LaGuardia or Reagan, where it's a tough land because of the maneuverability, whether you've got the rivers or the buildings, whatever. But now we're also dealing with drones and a lot of other distractions, right?
Right. Well, yeah, we're all very concerned about drones, and you know, this notion of air traffic control being undermanned has been something we've been discussing for quite a while. There have been a number of well-publicized near mid-air collisions, near collisions on the ground, and several right there at DCA. So we've got a problem with congestion in our airspace and on the runways. You know, sadly, it's only a matter of time. Any time that you have a system that isn't absolutely perfect, there will be errors at times. It's the job of this mishap board to figure out all the environmental, the human factors, and mechanical issues that could have played into this, and how to put forth procedures to make it better and safer in the future.
Does the FAA and the air traffic control systems need a major overhaul and update? I mean, the National Airspace System is pretty old.
It is old. The computers are antiquated. There's, you know, we certainly try to appropriate money as Congress, but we've got to, this is probably a wake-up call, sadly, to take a very deep dive into this and figure out where our shortcomings are and where we need to get the system up to par.
You know, people should just go to these websites that have, you know, the radar and logging all these flights coming in and out. It's crazy how many planes and aircraft are in the sky at one time in these major cities. And you know, hats off to the air traffic controllers. They do a great job day in and day out. We'll find out what this was. But Florida Congressman Scott Franklin, we appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Rob.